Why is it that the more conservative somebody is, especially if you're a man, the more likelihood you believe that women and non-whites shouldn't have the right to vote? Because it's ingrained within Christianity that only white men or privileged men, depending on what nationality you are, whether you're Jewish or white, any man who does not own property or doesn't have a wang doesn't have the right or shouldn't have the moral right to vote. You look at history where the groups of people that came over to America before 1776 were 9 out of 10 times they were white, Caucasian, cis, heterosexual men and their lineage. Which is not surprising why Thomas Jefferson wrote, "All men are created equal, not all people." Because at that time in history, before 1868, they did not believe that anyone who wasn't a land-owning, white, God-loving man of privilege was not deemed significantly valuable unless they were owned by another human being. And this mindset is almost as old as time. This is why men of Caucasian descent were the slave owners of America and New England. Because almost all slave owners were of white descent. It's not a surprise that our founding fathers believed that black people were inferior. Thomas Jefferson wrote books and pamphlets about how black people are less worthy of holding public office, owning their own body, and voting. That's not something you'll probably hear in most schools. Our country has a problem. It's a cancer. Our country wasn't founded on the values we think it was. It was founded on racism, homophobia, sexism, religious persecution, xenophobia. Of course, the xenophobia kind of came later. But there was a joke in Family Guy that I still think is funny 10 years later, where Peter's making a joke in 18th century garments as a white man that everyone is equal. Everyone should have rights, privileges, and freedoms. And then he starts qualifying what's considered a man. And Peter starts saying how blacks, Jews, Italians, unless they're white, like from the United Kingdom, they're not considered 100% human and of equal value. And it's still true. Even in 2025, there are groups of people, a lot of conservatives. The more conservative, Bible-believing you are, the more religious you are, the more likelihood you believe that women should not have the right to vote, that we should repeal the African American and minorities amendments that guarantee everyone that isn't a white, cis, heterosexual man the same freedoms as that group of people takes for granted every day. There are states and countries that force their wives and girlfriends to vote the way they want to. I mean, Harris, when she ran for president, she had an ad that women from the Midwest or conservative locations can vote how they want and then lie to their partner about it. And men got really upset. Very upset. And getting upset is a very good thing if what you're getting upset against or for is something that should make you upset. But in this case, it's not. The men got upset not because the women were manipulated and coerced into voting against their will, against their autonomy, and against their best future. The men were angry because a woman made an ad that challenged their white male privilege. How dare a woman make a commercial that tells a man of cis heterosexual white skin that he cannot force, coerce, manipulate, and downright blackmail the women in his life into doing and voting the way he wants to. That's what they were outraged. The lack of ability, or calling them out for being assholes. They got mad because they don't want to be looked at like an asshole. Not that the women, the women actually have to lie in 2024 because men can't handle that some people don't believe and vote the same way they do. I never expect people I know, my family, my friends, anybody to vote the way I do. I don't expect them to. I don't even ask. It's no one's business. And really, unless your spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, partner, gives you that information, don't ask. It's none of your business. And if someone has to lie about how they voted, you're not a safe person to be around. You're not. You're not someone who's instilling in somebody the open-mindedness, the vulnerability, the safety that all partners should not take for granted, but should expect. And if someone has to lie to you about something good they did, you're not good for them. Any man who gets mad that women shouldn't be forced to do as they're told is an awful human being. I actually thought it was funny when they made the ad. And then I thought about it some more, and I thought, any woman that can't vote the way she wants to is not safe. There are men out there that will divorce their wives or beat them up for daring to vote against what the head of the household has to say. The idea of a man being the head of the household is as Christian as slavery is to the beginning of our country. It's just synonymous with religion. Nobody has been a more staunch supporter of slavery, sexism, abortion deaths, genocide, and infanticide as Christianity. And a lot of other religions too. America's not a Christian nation, and it's never been founded on Christian principles. It was founded on the idea that white, heterosexual, cis men should have the rights and privileges they may have been denied in their home country. There was nothing about women or any nationality that wasn't Caucasian. Those are the values we were built on: racism and sexism. And God forbid if you're gay, because back then they probably would have killed you. Luckily now it's not as prevalent, but homophobia in the Midwest and really anywhere in the world is very common. And what's really sad is we still live by the principles that slavery really perfected, that white cis heterosexual men decide the world we live in. And in a lot of places in America, that is still true. Why is only one president not white? Why are none of the presidents anything but male or cis? Why is there less than 4 presidents who were not married at the time they held the presidency? Because America will elect a rapist, a sex offender, a pedophile, a white, scuzzy pig before they will elect a qualified ex-vice president who just happens to be a different race, ethnicity, or a different gender. And honestly, I don't want to live in a country that thinks Trump is a better leader than Harris. And yeah, there were probably more qualified people than Harris, but they didn't run, or they didn't get the support they needed to be the biggest Democrat chance for the White House. But nothing Harris lacked will ever be worse than Trump. Trump is a raving racist. And as long as we view women and anyone as inferior, I mean, the concept, the idea of talking about whether anyone who isn't white and male should have the right to vote is dehumanizing. If anyone believes that women should not have the right to vote, have an equal say in any institution or partnership, even marriage, is a dangerous person. Men don't get the final say unless women let them. And we need to stop letting them. We need to start electing and even being together with people who are safe to be around. I would never date anyone who believes that women are inferior, that they shouldn't vote. Anyone who sees non-white people, minorities and ethnicities, as not being capable or smart enough to vote and hold office, those people are dangerous people. MAGAs and fascists and nationalists, Christian nationalists, are a threat to every group that doesn't look like a Norman Rockwell painting. There's a reason why paintings of the U.S. always seem to have a white person in the picture. Because you go back to the decades in American history of the 20th century, the decades with the most homophobia, sexism, racism, were decades that are nostalgic to white people. That's why white people like the 50s, the 80s, the 90s. Because they weren't black, they weren't gay, they weren't female. Because no one in their right mind who remembers history correctly would ever want to return to those times. Because women didn't have rights, they were male property. African Americans didn't have rights, or rights equal to a white man. Gay people were hunted and killed. So there's no time to go back to that's great for everyone. And anyone who thinks America was great, they're probably white, because nobody who isn't white would probably say that. There has never been a time in our country where anyone who was LGBTQIA, anybody in that community, America has never been great for them. It's never been great for anyone that isn't cis, white, and heterosexual, mainly men. There's no time to go back to. There's no time to make America great again, because that infers it was great for everyone at some point, and it hasn't been. And I read somewhere, by the time women, queer people, trans people, any race that isn't white, for every country and every group to have equal rights with white, cis, heterosexual men, it will probably take almost 300 years into the future. Women deserve better. And if women's safety hinges on staying single, child-free, and maintaining friendships instead of relationships, that might be the best route for them. And I'll say it again. The future is female. The future is queer, because those groups aren't threats against most people. Unless you're a raving bigot or homophobe, queer people, trans people don't scare you. Only weird and dangerous people, ignorant people, are scared of those groups. Because I will always say, my favorite groups to be around are women and the LGBTQIA+ communities. There's less racism and homophobia and sexism. Yeah, some of that is still there because we're dealing with toxic masculinity and shallow expectations because we're all human beings. But there is a dip. Like, statistics almost go away, when cis heterosexual men aren't in the group. 95% of predation evaporates. Racism, like 80%, is gone. Women just don't kill each other anywhere near what men do. And as long as we keep electing men who see everyone else as inferior or just something they have to endure, we're doomed. We need to stop electing white people unless they are the most qualified, kindest, most decent, and actually cares about people. It's been 250 years, and we've only had one non-white president. You can't tell me that in 250 years, there wasn't one non-white person, non-male person, that was more qualified, kinder, and could do much more good for America than what we elected. I mean, anything would be better than Trump. I mean, almost anything would be better than Trump. And regardless of what you have against Harris, I'm assuming some may or some may not, nothing she could or couldn't have done is anything in the ballpark of the stupid we have to deal with in 2025. I cannot wait for January, because that means we're 1 year down. Come January 20th, we will be 12 months through. We'll be 25% of the way through. We only have to do 3 more years, and then we can get rid of whatever garbage we have in D.C. Voting is not a requirement. Voting should not just be for men or for white men. It's a human right, a human dignity. And I'm pretty sure any country that doesn't let anyone that isn't a white, cis, heterosexual male vote, and you actively campaign to remove those rights, or already have taken it away, I'm pretty sure the UN would call it a human rights violation. Everyone, as long as they're an adult who hasn't committed a felony, and you're a U.S. citizen, or whatever country citizen you are, everyone has the right to vote, or not to vote. You're not a better citizen or a better Christian or a better American because you vote. It's a choice. And there should never be an expectation. And whatever reason you do or don't vote is a private matter unless it's something you want to talk about. There is no invalid reason to vote or not to vote. Just make sure that if you choose to vote, you're casting a vote for somebody who's going to protect everyone's rights, even groups of people you don't understand, you might not support, but they don't hurt anybody. I started to vote after 12 years to protect everyone in the LGBTQIA+ community, to protect women's rights, reproductive and physical rights, property rights, because cis heterosexual men of conservative Republican stance want to erode the equality women and gay people have just barely gained. And voting for me is something I want to do because it's one way I can be a good ally. And it's not the only way to be a good ally, but it's one of the ways I choose to pursue. And every 2 to 4 years, I can re-examine who I vote for, what I vote for, and why. But if we're not all free, nobody's free. And if people are oppressed, America's never been great for everybody. That's why I know when people wear hats or say stupid things like Make America Great Again, it was never great to begin with. So you can't return to a time that doesn't exist. And what they're really saying is they want to go back to when America denied African American voting. They want to go back to segregation, Jim Crow, where women were the property of men, where it was legal to grape your wife or beat her up. They want to return to a time where men didn't have to answer to Me Too. They want to return to a time where kids were lucky to grow to adulthood because the world was very dangerous and there wasn't as many safety precautions. They want to return to a time where the police could legally raid a gay bar because gay people weren't good people according to the 1950s homophobic beliefs. They want to return to a time where women could be prosecuted for having an abortion. They want to return to a time where men were valuable if you were white, and that anyone who wasn't cis, heterosexual, and male was considered a deformed version of masculinity. Nobody who understands history and loves every group in America that brings good things into America and good things alive in America will want anything to do with conservative or any type of group that wants to return to a time where most of America had less of a good future than they do now. And I don't want to go back to any time in history. You go back 15 years, gay people couldn't marry. There wasn't as many protections for children, and there wasn't as much talk about mental health crises. I don't want to go back to any year because nostalgia can create a situation where people don't remember the realities of a time when other people were less equal. Some people vote to protect what rights we have so other homophobic and racist and sexist groups can't take away those rights, or the damage they do is very limited. But there's different ways to protect rights. Protest, write pamphlets, go to events, have YouTube blogs. There are many ways to protect rights. And anybody who calls you less American or less human for not voting or for voting for good people, they're the problem, not us. And I always take history classes, so I learn about things. I learn that the history of yesterday wasn't as good as history books paint it to be. And if you're not cis, heterosexual, and male, America has never been great for anyone else. You can't return to a time that doesn't exist for everybody. And voting is an option, even though in my family it wasn't. People need to respect each other's beliefs as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. I constantly tell my family they're racist and homophobic because they can't not keep voting for people like Donald Trump or Bush. But voting is something personal. No one has a right to know if you did or not. Nobody has a right to know. If you want to tell somebody, fine. But if it's not your vote or your ballot, mind your own business. I had to make my own life, my own way, and my own money to actually make a decision of what I wanted to vote for and if I even cared. That's not something everyone in America can say they have access to. There are women out there that are forced with threats of violence or divorce to do exactly what their slave owner says, their husband. There are parts in the world, even in America, where conservative men view their wives as property, even though the law says something else. We don't want to return to any time before 2025. Because people aren't even safe in 2025. Can you imagine going back 30 years? I mean, 21 years ago, it was legal in one or more states for a man to assault his own wife. You don't want to go back to any time before 2025. The rights we have now are nowhere near what rights we should have. But it's a good start. And you have to find out what you want and how you go about getting it without hurting anybody else. And that's what makes allies different from MAGA and conservative bigots. Because there are bigots everywhere, even in the Democratic Party. I choose not to be the kind of person that forces my will, my religion, and my beliefs, or my atheism, on other people. I vote in a way so that everyone can have the abortion they want, if that's what they want to do. That everyone can marry whom they love and exist safely in whatever neighborhood or place in town they call home. That nobody has to have their kids forced to learn about religions they don't want them to. And that everyone has a safe place where they can live their lives. And you have to find what way you want to go. I'm the only person in 18 members of my family that isn't homophobic, racist, xenophobic, Christian, sexist, you name it. Tomorrow is going to be very awkward because it's going to be my first Christmas as an atheist. Thanksgiving was pretty awkward. Easter was pretty awkward. My family doesn't allow anyone to have any differing opinions or lack of religious beliefs. They ignore that it even happened, or it's just not a good scenario. I have to decide if that's something that I want to do every year or if it's something I never want to do again. And that's something that everybody, just like voting, you have to make your own choices. And thank goodness that decades and generations of people before 2025 took a stand, protested, voted, or did something in their own way to protect the rights we have now. Because it's not a given. If I saw a sign in a picture in a history book, a gay person was holding a sign that says, "Silence equals death." If you stop protesting, stop talking, stop voicing your opinions and whatever it is that you want to say, they will silence you and probably kill you at some point. So never stop fighting for the good things that America can offer. But America wasn't founded on Christianity. It was founded on the white man's dream. Because you have to be sleeping for you to believe it.